Dr. Barbara Endicott-Popovsky. I'm the Director of the Master's Program in Infrastructure Planning and Management in the Urban Planning Department within the College of Built Environments at the University of Washington. I welcome you to the second in the 2015 webinar series, and today we are going to hear from Bob Freitag, who is a senior instructor in our program, as well as being the director of the Institute for Hazards Mitigation, Planning and Research in the Urban Planning Department, and the director of the Master of Infrastructure Planning and Management Floodplain track, which is being introduced this year. So Bob is going to talk to us about disaster resilience and land use planning. Bob draws from many years of experience as a FEMA director. He has additional experience that he can share with you to give you a sense of his background. But we're very pleased and proud to have him in the department and to have him part of the program. So Bob, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Well, thank you very much. Today we're going to explore a topic that I've been concerned with for some time, the role of hazards mitigation planning and comprehensive land use planning. Hazard mitigation planning really got its start within FEMA with the Disaster Management Act of 2000. And comprehensive planning in this state has a rich history that goes back to the 30s. But most recently in 1990, the Growth Management Act was passed, and that's kind of directed land use planning since 1990. Hazards mitigation planning is a voluntary act, or it's voluntary in the sense that FEMA does support it, communities adopt it, and but it often doesn't go into comprehensive planning. The Growth Management Act is law and leads a whole range of police powers, capital improvement programs, and is a very strong document with a lot of muscle behind it. So we're going to explore how we can use both of these. One can reinforce the other and can benefit from the other, from these two planning processes. And I want to say that they have a different purpose, really. Hazard mitigation planning looks at risk and looks at hazards, where the environment is kind of the enemy: floods, tornadoes, earthquakes, scary things. Comprehensive planning and growth management looks at us as being the scary thing, changing the environment in a way that we don't want to because of our growth. So here we have a glass half empty and a glass half full approach. So today we're going to explore ways that we maybe can get to one glass and see where we are. I don't know if I'll answer a lot of questions, but I'll raise some, and let's go. So let's go to the next slide. So today we're going to talk about what is mitigation very briefly, and I'm using mitigation and adaptation pretty much the same. We'll need a good example, and I'm really excited about one from Florida, Tampa Bay in Hillsborough County. We'll use that as kind of a way to start a discussion. We'll need a local issue, and climate change is as good as any, and it's certainly appropriate. And also we'll need some local examples, and I'll use some work that we've done with Snohomish County and with the city of Snoqualmie. I'd like to give some credits initially. The work that you'll see here has been done by some graduate students of ours, Joseph Hammond and Jonathan Oltz were their ex-students, and they're working in the field. Sam Riley is working on this issue specifically, and Gene Henry, I'd like to thank. Gene Henry is a planner within Hillsborough County, and everything I know really is what he told me. And FEMA has provided some resources along the way. Kristen Myers, Amanda Soki, Kelly Stone, and others have really helped us kind of explore this issue. So what is mitigation? Mitigation really is fairly simple to understand. You either do nothing, that's not mitigation, but you can either retreat, accommodate, or protect. Retreat has a bad connotation, so I'm searching for another word. Maybe relocate is a word, or remove. But when you look about mitigation, what you want to do is remove the need to prepare for a disaster. So you want to retreat, accommodate, and protect. And we'll kind of use that. The problems come with how to implement this. How do you retreat? How do you get people not to build in hazardous areas? How do you, once they build in those areas, how do you incentivize relocation from those areas? So we'll be talking about retreat, accommodate, and protect, throughout this. And I kind of like the word wrap, but it doesn't seem to catch on with anybody but me, but retreat, accommodate, protect, wrap. So we'll go on. So let's look at Hillsborough County as an example. And Hillsborough County is in Florida, and you can see, if we go clockwise, you can see the Florida map. The areas in red are areas that would be inundated with a 9-foot surge, and you can see how flat the state is. You see then the icon with the manatee in the corner. I like to put that wherever I can. In the center, you see a more detailed map of the Tampa area, and again, the red are areas that within 6, 7, 8 feet would be inundated with storm surge. Now, it doesn't take a lot of cleverness to revision this as a climate change scenario with sea level rise and with increase in frequency of severe storms. These are areas that will be inundated at increased frequency, as well as some areas become permanently inundated. And this is the kind of image I want to leave with you. This is Hillsborough County. This is an area that is at risk currently, and with every year the sea is rising, and they're experiencing more frequent severe events. Moving around at about 7 o'clock, you can just see some coastal communities along the area, and then you can see some damaged area from a high tide with a surge. The picture at about 9 or 10 o'clock is downtown Tampa, and look beyond it, you can see how flat it is. But this is the image I want to give you. Here's a community that is vibrant, it's exciting, it's a very nice place, but it has some issues. Nothing having really to do with it. This is a plan that was done by Hillsborough County, and I think it offers some great lessons for us and some great things to kind of explore. This is the Hillsborough post-disaster redevelopment plan, and it was done with FEMA money. It has been incorporated as a part of their general plan, so it has been adopted by reference, and it helped to guide some of the things within the general plan. When you look at it, you can see along the edge, you see some purple areas. Those are areas of extreme hazard for storm surge. The risk that they have is from a storm coming into the bay, piling up water into the bay, that bay water then running into the land and damaging the built environment along the coast. Storms usually, they cross Florida often, but when they do come in from the Gulf, they're usually fairly wet, and they drop a lot of rain inside in the interior that then runs out in or ponds. So this is kind of the hazard of the area, and I like to use the word changes for hazard. Hazards are just changes we haven't prepared for, and we live with changes on a daily basis. So I want to kind of have you accept that kind of concept that hazards are not necessarily dangerous. They're just changes we have to get used to. If you look at the impacts in the area, the impacts are to that area that will be inundated, in the gray area that you can see. I want to point out the dots, and go to the next slide here. The gray, you see redevelopment areas, and they're called priority recovery areas that are the stars, and they're in gray or in brown. The smaller ones I think are in black. These are redevelopment areas in areas that aren't necessarily without risk, but where risk can be accommodated. So these are smart growth areas, these are urban development areas. From a planning context, these are areas where new populations will be concentrated as new commercial areas. What they have done, and to me is extremely excited, they have incentivized those growth areas. They've disincentivized areas along the coast that are at risk both from surge as well as continued risk from sea level rise. And areas within those high-risk areas, the individuals can mitigate. They can elevate the structure, they can put up seawalls as long as they don't harm somebody else. But when the shoreline retreats behind them, they can no longer build, they cannot rebuild. And that density can be absorbed in the interior and slowly merge into a different environment. So the retreat and accommodate, or the retreat and relocate, that's my searching for a better word than retreat. As a little side note, I gave a presentation in the East once, and I said, well, we're going to retreat from some of these difficult areas, and almost to a person in the audience, they said, look, we don't retreat. We can fight this. We can do something. Well, I'm not talking about retreat in that context. So those areas, especially the ones in purple, are areas where additional growth is not incentivized, whereas the area becomes more severe and it becomes uneconomical to live there, they cannot rebuild, and that population, that density goes to those brown stars that you see. So that's retreat. Again, I pointed out that those areas are accommodation areas. They're not without risk, but they can accommodate sufficient risk and a tolerable level of risk. Then if we go again, we'll see areas of protection, if I can do that. So in the plan, they've established retreat areas that they're not going to incentivize, and this is at a great cost to them because they get a lot of tax dollars to that, but it's a short-lived cost, or a short-lived benefit, because those areas tend to cost more over the long term than they do over the short term. So they have areas where they've retreated, they have areas where they can accommodate a tolerable level of risk, and there are areas of protection where they've decided that because of cultural values, because of dependent uses, they have to maintain in that location. And so in those areas and those areas only, they're talking about seawalls and levees and those kind of mechanisms to continue the viability of the area. So let's go on to the next. I'm going to use a local example, and the local example was given to me by Dan Sokol, and I'd like to kind of give him credit for this. Whenever he started a discussion on climate change, he would always use the slide and said that if you don't believe in science by now, you're not going to believe it. And so I'm not going to spend some time. If you want to talk about, look about science, look into science, and whether you accept science or not, that's a whole other discussion. So we're going to accept climate change, and we're going to accept that we are responsible for the increased rate of global warming that we're currently experiencing. So this is a hydrograph, and so the issue we're going to talk about is climate change in the Northwest, and we're going to blend in some of the planning concepts that Hillsborough County is exploring and incorporated in their plan. And so this hydrograph has a bunch of curves on it, but I want you to concentrate on the black one. The black curve there shows the current situation. And what that illustrates is that in January and February, if you look at that black curve, we have a peak discharge from our mountains. And this is a similar one to all of our Cascade Mountains. They're low mountains, they have some snow, and you can see, but most of the rain in the valleys falls in the January, February. But if you look at the May, June, there's also a second peak. Concentrate on that black line. So when the snow melts, the water runs off. And we have a second peak. So we can get flooding in the Northwest in those rivers that are drained by from the Cascades. We can get flooding in January, February. We can get flooding, in December, January, February. We can get flooding in June, July. That's today. Well, because of the Earth's warming and because of the concentration of just energy in the atmosphere, we're not getting the snow that we have, and that will disappear slowly. So we'll go from a rain-dominated system on this side of the Cascades and the other side to a rain-dominated system, and this will remove that summer peak. So we'll have high flows in the summer. We'll have high flows in the winter, low flows in the summer, and we're starting to have that today. There's very little snowpack. We've been actually having that, but this year is kind of an example of what we can expect. There's very little snowpack in the mountains, and people are very concerned about summer flows. And so we're going from a snow rain dominated system to a rain dominated system, probably no more net increase in terms of water that's being run off, but it's coming in the winter. I want you to kind of keep that thought. And this was a series of maps that were done by a student. This was his, I think it led to his dissertation, but it was his master's for Joseph Hammond. And what you see is you see the Skagit River, you see the Delta area, and the area outlined in red is the FEMA 100-year floodplain today. So that's what's mapped today. And the lighter the color, the lighter, yellows and greens are the shallower areas, but still wet, and the blue are deeper. So this demonstrates the same thing that's on the hydrograph, but this is on plan view. And so we have this is a 2020 flood projection, 2040, and oops, I went too fast. This is a 2080. So you can see that over time, the 100-year flood is just, it's taking up more space. There's more areas that are flooded. This is during the winter period because you have the same amount of water that's draining, but it's coming now predominantly in the winter months. So let's look at that a slightly different way, and I'm going to try to go a little faster here, but this is another hydrograph. This shows a mean climate change projection, and what you see here is the 100-year flood now becomes the 30-year flood. Another way to look at it is here. These are two scenarios. This one assumes that we're on a current trajectory or a current trajectory without sequestering carbon. This assumes that we've made some moderate increases in reducing carbon and also sequestering carbon. And here you see the same thing, that you have a 30-year flood, the 100-year becomes, the 2080 flood becomes around the 23 to 30 year. If we do nothing, it becomes around the 10 to 12 to 16 year. Looking at this at a 10-year flood, and I don't put this here because most of our damage really comes around that 10-year period. And so we see that it's becoming a 5-year flood. So areas that were flooded every 10, 15 years are now flooded every 2, 3 years, 4, 5 years. And that has a tremendous implication. Here is the Snohomish County kind of future vision for the growth management plan. And I just want to, this is what's in the plan currently. And I'm going to talk about what's officially in the plan, and then we're going to put in the hazards element and show how they can kind of help support each other. So in here you see that the plan will accommodate growth within urban growth areas, reduce land consumption through urban development, will reduce development pressures and patterns of sprawl, will conserve agricultural lands, forests, and mineral resource areas, and will preserve open space. These are objectives within the current plan to address growth. So let's go and look at that same, oops, I just put these are the growth areas where you can kind of see where their urban growth areas are. And I'm going to do this. Now this is the Snohomish vision, but now I'm looking at the hazard mitigation plan. And I'm looking at the tools would be the Growth Management Act, the Capital Improvement Program, the Critical Areas Ordinance. Those in Washington are familiar with those documents. But let's look at objectives that support the general planning objectives, looking at growth, but now we're dealing with hazards. Incentivize retreat from high-risk areas to urban growth villages. To disincentivize development in high-risk areas, to conserve resource lands, and I would like to consider the floodplains, other critical areas, wetlands as resource lands because they're ecosystem services that are as accountable as those produced by mines and agriculture. Incentivize opportunities to store water, to enable low-risk communities to accommodate floodwaters. This I want to spend a little time on. There are some communities that, you're not going to be able to build a levee to contain the water. And so for those lower frequency floods, 10 or 25, 30 years, the communities can be designed to accommodate them. So the flooding is shallow, It's over a larger area, and it just provides a bad day, but not something that comes up to a disaster. And I'll show you some examples of that. So again, just to show these are the growth areas, and I want you now to think back to Hillsborough County, and these are receiving areas for risk areas, and transfer development rights could easily be used as with the high risk areas that become high risk over time, that those areas can be transfer areas, those can be sending areas, and the receiving areas can be the urban villages that are within the current plan. And I want to say that we don't have the money. Many people think when you think of retreat, they think of a FEMA buyout. And I think, and that's good for, a casual buyout, but estimates that the coastal risks that we have in this country run into $330 billion to $400 billion of risk within the next 20 years because of coastal surges and because of climate change areas. We don't have enough money to do buyouts. And so this slow progression that as an area, defend as much as you can, but when you can't, establish a coastal construction line or a coastal easement, and then people then maybe can transfer those development rights to areas where there is a tolerable level of risk. And I just want to show some pictures of mitigation adaptation. These are kind of accommodate pictures right here. This is on the your left side. This is the city of Snoqualmie. All of these homes are elevated. A flood that occurs in this area is a nuisance, and there's no question about that. But it's not something that is life-changing. This is an area within an area within Issaquah, green homes. This site contain a 20-year, 30-year flood. The same is true here with the city of Seattle. This is a retrofit called C Street, which stands for Street Edge Area. An abutment. It's made out of, it's a more green abutment, but it still protects that bank. Here is an area of low till or no till to absorb water, and these are protection areas, and here's a home that's being moved as a part of a retreat. And I'm going to end with this. This is the city of Sultan, and I just took this at random. This is one of the growth areas within the Snohomish plan to absorb density. If you look at the red here are areas where there's repetitive loss. If you look at the blue is the 100-year floodplain according to FEMA. That also includes the 500-year floodplain. And I want you to think of this as an area during a climate change period in 20, 30 years when this 100-year floodplain is now a 20, 30-year floodplain. And this is Sultan. And by the way, the hatched area here is the floodway. I'm not going to be talking about that. So here you have an area of Sultan that is flooded and flood prone, again within the 100-year flood. So moving here, let's talk about retreat. Areas that continually get flooded can slowly retreat as no longer economically viable or doesn't present a safe living environment. These development rights could be transferred. They could be slowly disincentivized through a whole variety of things. You can talk about accommodate. The city of Sultan, instead of building huge levees, they can build, they should consider minimal structures, but the city could be elevated, the individual buildings as they are in Snoqualmie. So as flood becomes a 25 or a 30-year flood becomes a 20-year flood, or a 50-year flood becomes the 30-year flood, that these communities are kind of like a sieve where there's low energy water, standing water for a few days every 25 years, and they live with the flooding, the way Snoqualmie lives with the flooding. For protection, there are flat areas in here where practices could be made and you could detain more water, again, to flatten the hydrograph so you have lower depth of water, maybe over a longer period of time. So here we've looked at an existing situation where you can accommodate, protect, and retreat as a part of planning that could be incorporated in the general plan, could be helped implemented through the critical areas ordinance and the growth and the capital improvement program, and be part of the whole planning process. And again, I would strongly recommend that the critical areas ordinance and the transfer development rights programs include ecosystem services benefits and resource areas are floodplains and wetlands, that those are considered resource areas, and sending areas. So I've kind of gone through here. I presented a lot of ideas. I'm not going to go into this. This just talks about other areas, and I want to kind of end with this line, if I've got a little time, that whenever I talk, I've been in this business for 30 years, and I've been personally at 50-some disasters where I was either the FCO or the public assistance officer, and people benefit from disasters and people don't. And climate change is coming, and we're trying to slow it down to a tolerable level, and hopefully, you know, make it kind of flatline out at some point. But right now, we have to adapt, and we can do it as a part of our general planning process, where we're looking not just at growth within our general plans, but we're also looking at risk and a tolerable level of risk, and a resilience that includes communities self-organizing as this event kind of matures and continues. So I'm finished, and I would like, if there are any questions, I don't know if there's an opportunity for questions, but you can email me, and then what I didn't do, I didn't put on my email address. I was going to, but it is Freitag, B-F-R-E-I-T-A-G, @uw.edu. That's Freitag at uw.edu. So thank you very much, and I want to continue this discussion.
So Bob, I do have one question for you if no one else wants to jump in. This is Barbara.
Okay.
Or adopting this approach.
I'm
That
looking.
are taking a proactive approach, I should say.
I think there are a lot of communities looking at what is proactive, but I think they're kind of stovepipe. The hazard mitigation plans are done generally within the Departments of Homeland Security or Emergency Management, and they're becoming increasingly response-oriented. Land use planners, Seattle's going to have a tremendous amount of growth, and so they're looking at growth primarily, and they're just starting to talk about risk as a part of this, and ecosystem service benefits as a part of this. Areas where I've seen the greatest example are areas such as Tampa, where the driver, I mean, they're under severe threat. I mean, there's a low-lying area with tremendous threat, and so the driver is not just population, because it's a very attractive place. People are very nice, and I've got many friends there. But another driver is risk, and so they don't have the luxury of ignoring risk when they do their comprehensive plans. So I don't know if that answers your question. I have more questions about this. Hilton Head, I think, is doing some of that. I think that there's some of that discussion on the East Coast along the barrier islands, but there you have a problem with these communities on the barrier islands where they're meeting advisory base flood elevations, according to FEMA, but the issue isn't the level, the height of the water. The issue is that many of those shorelines are just disappearing, and there aren't areas to retreat to within the existing political structures. So I think we have to kind of step back, and we have to really rethink where we are on this, and hopefully this will it'll add to the dialogue. So thank you.
Well, Bob, I really appreciate your comments today. And for those listening, this is an example of the leading edge work that's being done in our department, the Urban Planning Department at UW, and Bob's leading work in this area of floodplain management. And because we are concerned about this problem as a department, and with Bob's leadership, we've opened a specialty track within the Master of Infrastructure Planning and Management that concentrates on this very issue. Because as Bob indicates, this is a pressing problem. We have communities in different parts of the country that have begun to wrestle with these issues proactively, But the message here is that this kind of an approach that Bob described ought to be in the toolkit of those people interested in pursuing a career in land use management in areas where this could be a problem. So we're very pleased to have Bob. We're very pleased that we are opening up this specialty area. And I'd like to just take a moment for those of you that are interested to describe the Master of Infrastructure Planning and Management in general, from which this floodplain track derives. We are in our third year of this degree program, finishing up our third year, recruiting for another group of students to join as a cohort. And we've been offering this program to a variety of people who have interest in careers in emergency management. Obviously, that is something that would come to mind after listening to Bob. Or they have interest in critical infrastructure planning within industrial organizations that are increasingly having to think through their reliance on critical infrastructure and the issues of business continuity and disaster recovery as it might impact them. So we're seeing our graduates that work in industry as well as in government roles, and we're seeing an awakening part of entities of all sorts that they need to include this kind of thing in their planning processes. So the first year of the master's degree covers some basics in urban planning. We cover finance, we cover emergency management, we give you an overview of critical infrastructures, and at the same time, we also give you a set of tools. So you'll learn things like GIS, you'll learn epidemiology, because certainly if we have an outbreak of contagion, organizations need to be prepared for how they continue business if a good portion of the population is devastated. And so you walk away from that first year with an overview of critical infrastructures. There are 6 of them that we focus on. We focus on food, naturally water, you've heard from Bob, energy, transportation, communications, and public health. These are the 6 infrastructures that we believe as a department are those that are necessary for the health of any community. That's bare bones. And certainly anybody in the planning function needs to be thinking about how do we shore up, how do we modernize, how do we connect these infrastructures or not to various new communication technologies, because I think it's rather well known that our infrastructure needs an overhaul. And so as we begin to grapple with infrastructure and updating and recreating in the 21st century a viable infrastructure set, we need to have those people who are prepared to contribute their thinking in that regard. So once you complete the first year, your second year will be devoted to diving in to 5 of those 6 infrastructures. We give you an opportunity to learn about each in more depth and then select 1 or 2 that you can focus on as part of your capstone. And this is the brilliance of the approach. You begin in your first year with an overview on infrastructure, and then in the last year you begin to focus in on those infrastructures where you'd like to specialize. And we often will have students take advantage of internships. We have a robust advisory board with active careers in these various spaces that are available to you, a couple of advisors with real-world experience that are available to you to help guide your career and answer your questions. In addition, we have faculty that make themselves available by phone. We reach out to you in means like these with today's webinar. So Bob, why don't you just briefly describe how the water plane track will deviate from what I just described?
What we did is that after doing a lot of research with the Association of State Floodplain Managers, with a great deal of help from people like Larry Larson and the organization, we decided that there was a need to have a master's program in floodplain management. We took the core courses that Barb described GIS, systems design, and kept those as online courses. We then developed two summer two summer programs that are month-long, where we would talk about floodplain issues and the concentration in floodplain issues. So the first summer, which begins this June 22nd, we have courses on river and coastal mechanics, ecosystem services, basic floodplain management, and then we have a course on just issues in floodplain management. The second summer, we'll deal with applications of that, where we're going to have a charrette, and we'll have a law course as well as a seminar on current topics. The first summer, again, is science. The second summer is application. We wanted to do it as resident programs because there's a lot of field trips involved, and there's a lot of discussion that we feel has to happen. And the field is changing very, very quickly. So we're very excited to roll this out. And if you have any questions, again, please call Karen's email address is there, and she'll refer you to me. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Bob. After listening to you, Bob, I'm glad I live on a hill. So thank you very much. I hope we don't stay awake at night worried about this. Anyway, thank you, Bob, for your time. Karen, Armin, would you like to add something before we close?
I did see a quick question by Julie. She typed it into the chat window, just expressing that she knows there are some issues with government reports, even some using the term climate change in Florida can be of an issue. And yet Bob gave an example of a city there that is taking actions now with mitigation. How do you think they're able to overcome the political issues that relate to that?
Well, I'm not from Tampa, and I'm talking to Tampa, and you know, I mean, cities are different than the counties and the state, and they reflect different ideas, and a lot of the politics of climate change is just at that level, at the higher level. The local issue, you know, this is driven by increased surges, and it also addresses climate change. So they're using an event and describing an event that is understandable, is local, and certainly it has a lot of traction locally. So that's, I think, how they're addressing it. The climate change part of it is directly applicable, but they're also addressing an immediate need. So they're getting really both the naysayers, I think, that live there. So, you know, I mean, they can't ignore, you know, annual warnings of hurricanes and storm surge.
So, Bob, if I may, forgive me if this is oversimplifying. Politically, is the challenge more around deciding what's causing climate change as opposed to debating whether it exists? I mean, we certainly are seeing facts and data that indicate something is happening, and you're indicating that the risk factors are what's driving things when communities do move. Forget the politics, you've got a problem.
This is, yeah, if I can interject, there's been a study called the 6 Americas, I think, or 6 or 8, I think 6 Americas. It was done by, I think it was done by NOAA. I'm not sure. Maybe the National Weather Service, but it did point out that the people that are the real naysayers are people that have a vested interest in coal, in energy the way it is, and I don't know what you can do. I mean, this is not my area by any stretch of the imagination. We are instructed to use best available science, and there is no question what best available science is in this case. But politically, what they found out, this study did, is that the people who are the real naysayers on that end of the continuum, their lives would change so abruptly if they accepted this, that there is a visceral reaction that they can't accept it. Or they are making so much money on energy that they want to make as much money as they can before they can't. So I think that you have both those ideas. But As we used to say in FEMA, that's way above my pay grade, Barb, but I can offer an opinion like anybody else.
Well, and the way I explain this to students as well, Bob, is that as planners and working in political entities like cities and counties, you're simply not going to be able to avoid the political debate. It will happen. So you do your job and you get equipped to do what you know you need to do to respond to risks and do responsible planning, but recognizing that there is this divided opinion that you're in a position to perhaps understand and perhaps deflect or manage. So you'll find in our classes that our students reflect a diversity of opinion on this subject. But in the end, as Bob indicated, it's facts and data on the ground that will drive results. And so you can't deny that there's problems in Florida. You can't deny that there's problems in the Barrier Islands. And we do the best we can as planners. I agree, Bob. The politics are out of my pay grade.
Yeah,
But it's helpful to know what they are so you can deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just kind of curious what kind of dialogue went into that. So it sounds like there's a little bit of a disconnect.
With what? Dialogue with...
between the city level and the state level. I was curious about how that played out.
I don't know. I think that, you know, it's a city plan, it's a county plan. It addresses surges and a risk that is you know, it hangs over the area every year. And I think that was the driver. The fact that it also offers a tremendous kind of example on how we can look at climate change, I think is an added bonus. One of the debates going on within the planning circle, at least my part of the planning circle, is the whole concept of resilience and what Tampa's, they're not building back to any previous condition. They're evolving incrementally as a risk emerges, and the plan, you know, has a tremendous. I mean, it's a tremendous document in that context, that it evolves as you have need. Many times we put a 2020 plan, a 2040 plan, a 2060 plan, as if somehow, you know, at that point you're going to have, you know, you're going to meet your goals and objectives. This plan is a true resilience plan in the sense that the community self-organizes after every opportunity. And I think I've got a lot of hope that as the sea rises, and it's warm water, and that's where it's going to rise in that area, and as storms occur, people are going to, with increased awareness with each event, be able to adapt, you know, to the changing conditions. And and the politics of it. You know, we can talk about that, and in class, Barb, we do have a section, you know, where we take different sides of any political issue, but this is certainly one, and we try to find some common ground from a science standpoint that will get us to the same point from different perspectives, and that's not part of this webinar, but you know, there's an issue out there, and you know, just, you know, science is you know, is being questioned in some cases.
Well, I really appreciate your comments, Bob, in describing how we come to common ground in class with these discussions. We have a graduate that has shared with me their experience in the real world now, working in a city and having to do exactly what you're talking about, triaging different political points of view to find common ground so we can go forward in a critical infrastructure decision-making process. So the kinds of things that you're teaching in class to reconcile these differences is very useful to people in the real world, Bob, as they graduate.
And
So,
these discussions we got a big stage, but when you start to get to a small community, and you know, they understand the problems and they're willing to, I think, to address them. So I think there are many opportunities out there, and is the glass half empty or half full? Well, we're searching for a full glass, as I said, and I think we can get there.
So the bottom line is, in our program, people do develop the skills necessary to triage these kinds of debates that are going to be a reality in your working life.
Right.
But I appreciate your comments, Bob. Let me conclude this aspect of the webinar and ask Karen and Armin if they want to add anything.
This is
This is Karen Fischler. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Karen.
I was just going to say, this is Karen Fischler. I'm the program coordinator for the Master of Infrastructure Planning and Management. And if there's anyone listening to this webinar who is interested in talking about mechanics of applying, has questions about that, I'm happy to talk about the degree and help with any questions. So feel free to give me an email, and my contact information is on the screen. Thanks. Over to you, Armand.
Very good. I just wanted to point out that also the web link for the degree program's website is also shown on the screen. It's a great place to find more information on the MIPM program and the flood option that we have that's currently accepting applications. So thank you.
So thank you all. I think this concludes our webinar, and we'll resume with our next webinar. Karen, what is in the series?
We have a couple of webinars coming up. One is going to be on cybersecurity, and the other is going to be on how infrastructures all interrelate. And those will be scheduled for the next couple of months, dates to come, and we'll be sending out notices to let people know.